He was just a delivery kid, forgotten by the city, mocked in the ring, filmed as a joke, but when the gloves slipped on, and legacy stirred in his blood, everything changed. What started as a viral prank spiraled into a reckoning, one that would force Atlanta and the nation to decide, can greatness come from the wrong side of the tracks? Or do the streets raise champions history never planned for? This is the true fight. Not for a title, but for truth, for dignity, for a name. And it begins the moment the bell rings. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The smell of sweat, leather and chlorine-laced disinfectant hit Jalen Brooks the moment he stepped through the thick glass doors of Apex Boxing. He paused, one foot still hovering above the entry mat, his eyes widening as the scene unfolded before him. This place, it wasn't just a gym, it was a different world. Inside, bodies moved like machines, punching heavy bags in rhythmic thunderclaps. Trainers barked instructions, and treadmills buzzed under sculpted runners. There was no dust, no flickering fluorescent bulbs, no patched-up mats like the Morris Community Gym where his father once trained. This was pristine and alive, with money. Jalen stood there in his faded hoodie and beat-up sneakers, gripping a plain brown delivery box. Sweat from the late morning sun clung to his back like a second shirt. He wiped his brow and tried to remember the name on the delivery slip. Mike Townsend, he murmured, approaching the reception desk. The woman behind it barely looked up, scrolling through her phone with manicured fingers. He's in the back. First door on the left, she said flatly, tapping her gum without making eye contact. Jalen moved carefully, not wanting to bump into anyone, his wide eyes absorbing the sheer size of the place. As he passed by the main ring centered like a throne, he saw a crowd gathering around it. Phones were out, lights pointed in. Then he heard the voice. Look alive, people. The king of Atlanta's stepping in. Chase Dalton. The name dropped like ice water down Jalen's spine. He'd seen the man in highlight reels on YouTube and local sports news. Undefeated, ruthless, marketable. His pale skin glistened under the lights, blonde buzz cut sharp as razors, every muscle carved for attention. Jalen slowed to a stop, drawn in against his better judgment. In the ring, Chase danced lightly on his toes while his trainer adjusted the pads. Camera crew circled him like satellites, capturing every grin, every You getting all this? Chase called out to his cameraman, landing a slick combo. Make sure you don't miss the magic. The crowd laughed. A few clapped. No one noticed the black teenager standing off to the side, trying not to be seen. Then someone did. Hey, a voice barked. You lost, kid. Jalen turned. A stocky man with a clipboard, probably a producer or security, eyed him with suspicion. I'm just delivering, Jalen began.
Oh, a delivery boy.
The man smirked and nodded toward the gym floor. Thought you were a stray. Chuckles rippled. Jalen felt his ears burn. As he turned to walk away, one of the boxes in his backpack slipped loose and hit the floor with a muted thud. He bent quickly to grab it, but not fast enough to avoid more eyes and more voices. Quick hands on that one, someone called. Maybe he should try the bag, another chimed in. It was meant as a joke, a dig, but Chase, ever the showman, perked up mid-jab and glanced over. He grinned. Hold up, he said, waving a hand. Let's make this interesting. The cameras turned. The crowd hushed slightly, sensing a shift. Chase stepped toward Jalen with the grin of a lion playing with dinner. You ever boxed, delivery boy? Chase asked, loud enough for the whole gym to hear. Jalen swallowed hard. No, sir. Perfect, Chase said, eyes twinkling with cruel delight. Come in here. Let's show the fans how the real ones move. More laughter. A few claps. Phones lifted. Jalen looked around. Eyes were on him. Some amused. Some pitying. He gripped the straps of his backpack. I just came to drop this off, he mumbled. Chase leaned in, voice lower but sharp as glass. Scon man, give us a little entertainment. You people love a spotlight, right? The you people hit like a sucker punch to the ribs. Jalen's jaw tensed. The crowd didn't blink. One of Chase's crew tossed a pair of gloves at Jalen's feet. And Jalen froze. Not because he was scared, not really, but because somewhere in the back of his mind, he could hear his father's voice, raspy and strong. Never walk into a ring unless you're ready, but if you do, don't walk out with regret. His hand moved on its own, picking up the gloves. He stepped between the ropes. Gasps. Murmurs. More laughter. The cameras zoomed in. Chase circled him, bouncing. "Just a friendly minute," he said, though his tone suggested anything but. A bell rang. Someone hit a metal plate with a dumbbell. Chase moved fast. A jab, a cross, both light but smug. Jalen's body reacted on instinct. Slip. Duck. Pivot. He heard the crowd inhale. Chase narrowed his eyes. A third punch came faster, aimed lower. Jalen's hips turned. His right fist moved without thought. Smack. Clean. Just under Chase's ribcage. Not hard. Not meant to hurt. But it landed. Chase took a step back. The laughter stopped. The crowd leaned forward. Chase's face went flat. "You think this is funny?" he hissed, shoving Jalen hard. Jalen hit the ropes, stunned but steady. "Tomorrow," Chase growled. "You and me, 3 rounds. You want to play with the real ones? Fine. Let's see what you got." More phones came out. Someone was already live streaming. 3 rounds? Jalen echoed, heart pounding. "You scared?" Chase smirked. Jalen said nothing. He dropped the gloves on the mat and climbed out of the ring. Every eye followed him as he walked through the gym, the exit, and into the sunlight. No one spoke. Outside, the air was thick with humidity and shame. He made it to the bus stop with trembling fingers and a pulse that hadn't calmed since the punch. He kept his head low as other passengers boarded, their eyes darting toward him like they knew, like the whole city already knew. And maybe they did. Because by the time he reached into his backpack to grab his phone, he saw it. Notifications. Mentions. Comments. Clips. Delivery boy tries boxing. Gets schooled. Chase Dalton humiliates teen in front of cameras. Or worse. Who let the janitor in the ring? But then there was another. A single tweet from a retired boxer with a blue checkmark. Kid had head movement. Slipped 3 punches cold. That's not luck. That's raw. Jalen stared at it, then slowly unzipped the side pocket of his bag. Inside were his father's gloves, faded, frayed, still carrying the scent of aftershave and sawdust. He pressed them to his chest, his breathing slowing. The bus rumbled beneath him, pulling away from the stop. His reflection in the glass looked the same. Brown skin, sharp cheekbones, wary eyes. But something behind the eyes had shifted. He wasn't walking away from that ring in defeat. He was walking away in preparation. And he knew exactly where he'd be tomorrow. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was who else had just seen that video. And who was already on their way to find him, before the next round ever happened. The morning after the incident at Apex Gym, Atlanta's sun rose unforgiving and hard, its light less golden, more confrontational. The air thickened with heat, before it even touched the pavement. For most of the city, it was just another Monday. But for Jalen Brooks, it was a quiet war. He woke before his alarm. No dreams, just the feeling of unfinished business clinging to his chest like soaked cotton. He sat up, wiping sweat from his brow, and glanced across his room to the top shelf, where a stack of VHS tapes leaned unevenly beside an old, dust-covered player. The tapes were labeled in faded marker: footwork, Donovan B., angles and counters, feints, classic. They were all that was left of his father's legacy. Donovan Brooks had been a teacher before he was a fighter. Not in the school system. Jalen's family had never moved in circles like that. But in the community, in the backyards, the barbershops, the basements turned into makeshift gyms. He trained young boys in his neighborhood to defend themselves, to find control in a world that constantly reminded them how powerless they were. When Donovan died 5 years ago, the neighborhood changed. So did Jalen. He pulled on a hoodie damp with yesterday's sweat and stepped into the morning haze. The alleyway behind their apartment was still dark, in places where the sun hadn't reached, shadowed by fire escapes and chain-link fences. Trash bins lined one wall like silent spectators. Jalen dropped his backpack beside a cracked concrete planter and raised his fists. Jab. Jab. Slip. Cross. His voice barely above a whisper but firm. He moved with a rhythm that wasn't textbook, but familiar. Improvised footwork scraped across asphalt. His shoulders rolled like they had been wound with purpose. There were no mirrors, no trainer barking form corrections, just his breathing, and the ghosts that lived inside him. Each combination he threw was less about perfection, and more about memory. He could still see his dad's hands, big and calloused, holding up a sofa cushion like it was a sparring mitt. "Don't fight angry," he used to say. "Fight like you got something to protect." Jalen's knuckles stung from yesterday's hit, his only real punch. The contact replayed in his mind like a loop, not because it felt powerful, but because it had felt inevitable. He hadn't thought, he'd just moved. Something deep in his wiring had made the decision. That scared him more than the cameras or the crowd. He ducked beneath a low clothesline, spun and planted a sharp uppercut into the air, sweat flying from his brow. A group of crows scattered from a nearby dumpster with a ruckus. Still breathless, he stopped and leaned against a fence post. The sound of the city returned. Horns, sirens, a bus hissing to a stop on the main road. Jalen checked his cracked watch. Time to deliver. He threw on his backpack, tucked the sweat from his forehead into his sleeve, and jogged toward the stop just in time to catch the eastbound. Inside the bus, he sat near the back, headphones in but nothing playing. The city blurred by outside. The comments from last night's posts looped through his head like headlines in a ticker. Delivery boy ducked like a pro.
This kid got hands. Who is he?
Dalton let him land that shot. It was staged. Staged.
That one hurt most.
Not because it wasn't true. Chase had definitely thought he was in control, but because it implied Jalen was just another extra in someone else's highlight reel. That's how they saw him. Background noise. The bus pulled up in front of Apex Gym. His breath hitched. Even in daylight, the place radiated confidence. The glass shimmered. The logo gleamed. And outside, a black van parked sideways. Doors wide open. Camera crew spilling out, setting up tripods and rigs like they were shooting a movie. Chase Dalton had arrived. Jalen recognized the man with the clipboard. Same one who'd laughed at him yesterday. Okay, Chase, hit the bag for 10. Then we'll cut in on the sparring. Make sure we get reaction shots from the trainers. Jalen hesitated at the door. He wasn't supposed to be here today. His schedule rotated, and this stop had come up by chance. Or maybe not by chance. He clenched his jaw, forced his feet forward, and pushed open the door. The smell hit again. Clean, clinical, money. He moved fast, head down, sliding past the reception desk and toward the office with the name Mike Townsend stenciled in gold on the frosted window. As he walked across the gym floor, he could feel the difference. The air was charged. People watched him this time. Not just the receptionist. Not just the random guy wiping down equipment. But everyone. Trainers paused mid-sentence. Athletes lowered dumbbells. Eyes followed him with a blend of recognition, amusement, and something colder. He knew that look. The look that says you don't belong here. Not really. He reached the office, knocked, handed the box to a confused but polite assistant, then turned around. That's when he saw Chase again. The champion was center stage, shirt off, muscles tensed, hitting a heavy bag like it owed him money. Each strike came with a barked breath, a camera shutter, a spotlight of attention. But it wasn't just his punches that drew the eyes. It was what he said between them. This one's for the camera crew. Make sure you get my good side. Thud. And this one's for the street kid, with the lucky shot. Thud. The gym laughed. Jalen stopped in his tracks. They weren't just watching Chase. They were watching him. He didn't need to turn around to know that phones were up. Someone in the crowd nudged their friend and nodded toward him. Yo, that's him.
The delivery boy.
Jalen's chest tightened. He turned toward the exit. Just walk, he told himself. Keep walking. But fate has a cruel sense of timing. One of the boxes in his bag, half-sipped in his rush, slipped loose and hit the ground. It skidded across the smooth floor like a spotlight bulb. The gym went silent. The only sound was Chase's gloves hitting the bag. And then, not even that. Jalen crouched to pick it up, his fingers trembling. Yo, someone called. You see that? Man's got reflexes. Another laughed. Bet he'd do better with a broom. Polite chuckles. Then louder ones. The room was shifting. Again. Against. Then a new voice cut through the noise. Maybe we should let him try the bag again. The laughter died. Chase had stopped punching. He turned, face dripping with sweat, eyes locked on Jalen. A small, cruel smile grew on his lips. Hey, get that on camera, he said to his crew. We just found today's bonus content. Jalen stood frozen as Chase started toward him, a camera crew in tow, and this time it wasn't about a spar, it was about ownership, and the entire gym was about to watch who really held the power here. Jalen's fingers wrapped around the cardboard box as if it were a shield. He hadn't meant to draw attention. He never did. But that single box skidding across the gym floor had lit a fuse. Now all eyes were on him. Chase Dalton's camera crew moved like a school of sharks scenting blood. Microphones were pointed. Lenses zoomed in. Someone whispered, "Roll on this." Another mouthed, "This is perfect." Chase grinned, the kind of grin that never reached the eyes. It wasn't just confidence, it was entitlement. He wiped his brow dramatically with his taped wrist, then looked directly at Jalen like he was sizing up a meal. "You got a name, delivery boy?" he asked, voice echoing off the mirrored walls. "Jalen," he muttered, straightening slowly, hands still holding the now crumpled box against his chest. "Jalen, what?" Chase asked, not out of respect but for performance. "Brooks. Jalen Brooks." Chase repeated like he was testing how it would sound in a punchline. "Well, Jalen Brooks, you ever boxed before?" The crowd chuckled. A few low voices muttered, "Oh no," and "not again." Jalen didn't answer. His breath was shallow. His pulse beat in his ears. "I'll take that as a maybe," Chase said, then turned to the cameras. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Apex Access Unfiltered, where champions train and surprises walk in off the street." Laughter. "Let's give this kid his moment," Chase continued, gesturing to the ring behind him. 1 minute. That's all. No real punches. Just a taste of greatness. For the people. "Con man," someone behind the desk said. "You don't need to do this." Chase raised his eyebrows. "I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for the fans. The followers. They deserve entertainment. Besides, it's not like he's got anything to lose." The implication stung. Jalen didn't miss it, and neither did the others. Chase was saying it loud enough for the cameras to catch. This kid had no brand, no trainers, no status. He could be used, bent into content, forgotten in the edits. The crowd grew still, waiting for a response. And somehow that silence hit harder than the jeers had. Jalen's fingers uncurled from the box. "I don't have gloves," he said softly. "We've got plenty," Chase replied before he could take it back, signaling to one of his handlers, who tossed over a pair of worn black gloves. Jalen caught them. His legs didn't feel like they were moving, but they carried him forward anyway. Each step toward the ring felt like trespassing. People shifted to get a better view. A trainer leaned on the ropes and muttered to another, "He's gonna get embarrassed." His partner replied, "That's the point." Jalen climbed through the ropes. The mat gave slightly beneath his feet. He hadn't felt that kind of canvas under him in years, not since the Morris gym was shut down. That memory flared hot in his chest. His father's voice, not distant but vivid. "Feel the floor. Let it ground you, not trap you." Across from him, Chase bounced lightly on his feet, putting on a show for the cameras. His hands were up, but his eyes were lazy. The grin stayed fixed. Jalen adjusted the gloves. They were too big. The Velcro scratched his wrist. A bell rang. Not an official one. Just a soundboard from someone's phone. But it was enough. Chase stepped forward. One jab lazy. Just a feeler. Jalen slipped it. Another jab. Same tempo. Jalen ducked under it instinctively. That drew a murmur. Chase's expression faltered for just a beat before he smiled again. This time tighter. "Fast feet," he said. Then came the third punch. This one was aimed lower. Testing. And Jalen reacted. Not from fear. Not from calculation. Just movement. Reflex. He dipped and twisted his torso, his fist gliding forward. The glove landed just beneath Chase's ribcage. Not hard. Not enough to hurt. But clean. The thump echoed. Chase stopped. The room did too. The cameras captured it, one still frame of contact. Jalen's glove pressed against the abdomen of a champion. It was over in seconds. But it didn't matter. It had happened. Chase stepped back, blinking. His smile gone. He stared at Jalen, jaw clenching. "Nice shot," he said flatly. Jalen lowered his hands. "Fun's over," Chase added. Then, without warning, he shoved Jalen hard. Jalen stumbled back into the ropes, catching himself. "You think this is a game?" Chase snapped, stepping forward. His voice was no longer performative. It had dropped an octave, edged with venom. "You walk in here, disrespect this ring, and touch me? Who the hell do you think you are?" Before Jalen could reply, Chase turned to the cameras. 3 rounds. Tomorrow. Exhibition match. Let's give Atlanta something to talk about. There were gasps. Some of excitement. Some of discomfort. "You serious?" someone asked from the crew. "Dead serious," Chase snapped. "Let's see what the delivery kid's got when he isn't lucky." Jalen said nothing. He backed out of the ring, pulling off the oversized gloves and letting them fall to the mat. People stared. A few laughed nervously. One trainer said, "He's gonna regret that tomorrow." Jalen didn't hear them. He walked toward the exit, every step stiff, his ears hot. The sun outside burned his eyes, but he didn't stop. He reached the sidewalk and kept moving until he was out of sight. Then he stopped. He ducked into an alleyway and leaned against a wall, breath ragged. His hands were trembling, but not from fear, from rage, from humiliation, from the knowledge that he had been turned into a punchline, live-streamed and hashtagged before he could even catch his breath. He pulled out his phone. The clip was already online, dozens of versions, dozens of captions. When a delivery boy gets cocky, from FedEx to TKO, tomorrow's meme today. But there was one video that stood out. A short version, edited, looped, showing his slip, his evasion, and his clean body shot. No commentary, no mockery, just the move. And the caption, "That wasn't luck." Jalen stared at the screen. Somewhere deep inside him, something old and sacred stirred. It wasn't pride. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. He looked down at his hands, still shaking, still remembering. Then he opened the side pocket of his backpack and pulled out a small, soft pouch. Inside, Donovan Brooks's gloves, frayed at the cuffs, faded around the knuckles, but still whole. Jalen ran his fingers over the stitching. Tomorrow they would call him many things. Lucky, foolish, stupid, but they wouldn't call him invisible. Back inside the gym, Chase watched the footage of Jalen's counter in slow motion. Again and again, his trainer leaned in, uneasy. "You sure about tomorrow?" But Chase didn't answer, because what the cameras didn't catch, what only he had felt, was how that punch had landed. Jalen hadn't made it 5 steps past the corner store before his phone buzzed again. And again. And again. Each vibration felt like a jolt to the chest. Like someone knocking, not to say hello, but to remind him he was being watched. He slipped the phone out of his pocket, as if it were a weapon. The screen lit up with a storm. 86 unread messages, 3 dozen tags, 2 missed calls, and 5 new followers. For someone like Jalen, who rarely posted and never filmed himself, it was like being thrown into a flood with no warning. The first clip he saw had been trimmed down to 8 seconds. Chase Dalton in full glamour, grinning, throwing a jab, and Jalen, skinny, hoodie-clad, slipping it like he'd seen it in a dream. Then came the punch. Clean, crisp, unexpected. The sound of the glove hitting flesh was subtitled for effect. The moment the delivery boy got lucky. Laughter echoed in the comments. Flames, clown emojis. Some called it inspiring, but most made it entertainment. A few edits had even replaced Jalen's face with cartoon filters. Wide eyes, bubblegum, donkey ears. He didn't know which was worse, being ignored or being turned into a punchline. He stared for too long, screen burning his eyes, until he heard a familiar voice from the doorway ahead. "You serious right now?" Riley Brooks, arms folded, stood on the front porch of their apartment, her expression somewhere between fire and heartbreak. Jalen slipped the phone into his pocket, his shoulders rising on instinct. "I didn't ask for it," he muttered. Riley scoffed. "But you didn't walk away either. You let them use you." He stepped past her and into their 2-bedroom apartment. The place smelled faintly of lemon pine sol and burnt rice. Their mother's photo still sat crooked above the television, smiling the same way she had in every school picture Jalen could remember. "I was just doing my job," he said, collapsing onto the sunken couch. Then it became something else. "Yeah," Riley snapped, following him inside. "It became content, viral, and now you're the hood boxer they all want to joke about." Jalen said nothing. He stared at the floor, where his shoes left dust streaks across the tile. "You think they care about your skills?" Riley went on, pacing now. "They don't. You're a mean to them." A moment. Her voice cracked. That shook him more than any of her words. "I'm not trying to go viral," he said quietly. Riley sat beside him, her voice softer. "I know. That's the problem." They sat in silence. The TV flickered on in the background, automatically playing a sports recap. Jalen glanced up, and there it was again. A slow-motion replay. His slip, his punch, Chase's reaction. This time, it came with a segment title at the bottom of the screen. "David versus Dalton?" A sportscaster's voice narrated, and while it may look like an underdog moment, Sources confirm this was an impromptu spar and not a sanctioned bout. Still, speculation mounts about whether Chase Dalton has finally met someone who can challenge his reign, or if this was just another manufactured media moment. Riley grabbed the remote and shut the TV off with a flick. I swear to God if this turns into something bigger. But it already had. There was a knock at the door. Jalen tensed. Riley stood. She opened it slowly, cautiously. A tall, lean man in a branded Apex Gym tracksuit stood there, flanked by a young assistant holding a clipboard. Jalen Brooks? The assistant asked. Yes, Riley answered, her eyes narrowing. The man stepped forward. All business. My name's Blake Monroe. I'm a public relations coordinator for Chase Dalton. We're offering an opportunity for Jalen to appear in tomorrow's exhibition match. Nothing serious, just 3 rounds promotional. Local exposure, digital streams, maybe a sponsorship. Riley stiffened. No, she said immediately. Jalen began. No, she said again. Sharper. Blake reached into his pocket and pulled out a flyer. Jalen's face, frozen in mid-punch, was front and center. Street to spotlight, Jalen Brooks versus Chase Dalton. The date was printed in bold. Tomorrow at 7 p.m. What the hell is this? Riley barked. Just promotion, Blake replied coolly. It's already booked. We're expecting a strong turnout. You didn't even ask. You went live in front of 6,000 viewers. Blake cut in. We're just responding to demand. With that, he handed over a waiver, nodded once, and left. The door closed like a verdict. Riley ripped the flyer in half. This is exploitation, she muttered. Jalen didn't move. He just stared at the torn paper, then at the gloves resting at the edge of his backpack, the same ones that had traveled with him everywhere. Always hidden, always sacred. He reached for them now. Donovan Brooks's gloves. He pulled them close and felt the frayed leather beneath his fingertips. The last time they'd been used was in a neighborhood tournament his father had coached back when Jalen was too young to fight, but old enough to remember the pride in his father's eyes. You wore these, he whispered. He held the gloves to his face. Outside, car horns blared. A group of teens down the street shouted at a passing bus. The world moved. Indifferent. But something inside him was beginning to root. I didn't ask for this, he murmured again. But the words felt different this time. Not like retreat, more like permission. He stood. Riley looked up from the table. Jalen, I'm not doing it for them, he said. Not for views. Not for Chase. Then why? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked down at his hands, then at the old gloves, then back at his sister. For Dad, he said. For us. She didn't argue. Instead, she nodded once. Then added, if you're really gonna do this, don't let them write your story for you. Jalen nodded, the decision wrapping itself around his spine like steel. He picked up the gloves, slid them into his backpack, and walked toward the bedroom. He didn't have a trainer, didn't have a plan, but he had something more dangerous. A reason. What he didn't know was that a man watching from a flickering TV screen across town had just recognized the name Brooks and remembered the last time those gloves had been in a ring, and he wasn't planning to stay silent. The apartment was quieter than usual. Not silent. No home in that neighborhood was ever truly silent, but quieter in the way only a storm can be before it hits. Jalen sat on the edge of his bed, Donovan's gloves spread out in front of him like relics on an altar. His fingers moved slowly over the stitching, tracing the seams like a path back to a father he could no longer ask questions to. Each mark in the leather held a memory, a lesson, a mistake corrected with patience and calloused hands. And somewhere between the worn-down padding and the faint smell of sweat that refused to fade, Jalen could still feel him. His presence, his pride, his voice buried deep in marrow. Riley had gone quiet since the flyer incident, pacing in the living room like a lioness trying not to pounce. She hadn't said a word when Jalen walked out earlier to grab a notebook from the corner store. She knew this wasn't just about boxing. She knew what it meant for a young black kid with no team, no trainer, and no pedigree to step into a ring built by white corporate hands. This wasn't just a fight. It was an ecosystem feeding off his humiliation. And still, Jalen couldn't shake the need to face it. The knock came just after 9 p.m. Not rushed, not timid. Just 3 solid raps against the door. Deliberate and full of purpose. Jalen opened it, expecting a neighbor or maybe another PR vulture from Apex. But what he found was something else entirely. The man standing outside wore an old bomber jacket with cracked leather at the elbows and dust on the shoulders. His face was aged, weathered not by time but by trials. His eyes were sharp, the kind that had seen too many fights outside the ring. He held no clipboard, no camera, just a small duffel bag slung over one shoulder and a look in his eyes like he knew the whole story before Jalen could say a word. "You look like your father," the man said. Jalen's breath caught. Who are you?" The man offered a hand. "Marlon Carter. I trained Donovan back in the day. And from what I've been seeing online, I think it's time I returned the favor." Jalen didn't take the hand right away. He studied him, scanning for any sign of clout chasing, opportunism, or manipulation. But Marlon didn't blink. He just stood there, the same way a corner man waits between rounds, calm, firm, and ready. "You trained my dad?" Jalen finally asked. From the first time he laced up gloves till the day he beat Vic Jamison in that underground state match. Donovan was the real thing. Not just talent, discipline, focus. He didn't fight for cameras. He fought to keep the lights on, to keep the city honest. Jalen stepped aside slowly. Marlon walked in, nodding at Riley, who studied him with cautious eyes. "Donovan used to bring Jalen to the gym as a kid," Marlon added. "Watched every session from the stairs. Always quiet. Always watching." Riley sat, arms folded. "Why now? You've had 5 years." Marlon didn't flinch. "Because until now, no one lit the match. But when I saw that video last night, the way he slipped that jab and stayed balanced, it was like deja vu. That's Donovan's footwork. That ain't luck. That's blood memory." Jalen's heart beat faster. He didn't realize how much he needed someone to say that, to confirm he wasn't crazy, wasn't reaching. "So you want to train me?" Jalen asked. The words sharp, a little defensive. "I want to remind you of what's already in you," Marlon corrected. "You got instincts. But instincts without structure? That'll get you hurt. Especially in a ring like this one." Jalen swallowed. "Chase ain't gonna fight clean, is he?" Marlon gave a short laugh. "Clean? Kid, he's not even gonna fight fair. This ain't about sport for him. It's spectacle. A white poster boy pro, corporate-backed, with sponsorships depending on his image. You landing a clean shot on him messed up the narrative, so now they need to put you in your place, on camera, in HD with crowd reactions, and a post-fight interview full of fake apologies." Riley's face hardened. "Then why let him fight at all?" "Because sometimes the only way to dismantle a lie," Marlon said, lowering his voice, "is to let it see itself unravel, from the inside." Jalen stood, suddenly restless. He walked to the window, staring out at the blinking streetlight below. Kids still played ball down the block. Laughter echoed faintly, warped by humidity. "So what do you want me to do?" he asked. "Say yes," Marlon said. "Say yes to training, to preparation, to legacy. Say yes to reminding this city that Donovan Brooks didn't raise no background character." There was a pause. Then Jalen nodded. "Yes," he said. "I'm showing up." A silence followed, not heavy, but full. Then Marlon shouldered his bag again. "Meet me at Morris Gym. Midnight. Don't bring your ego. Just bring those gloves." Jalen nodded again, firmer this time. As Marlon turned to leave, Riley called after him. "Why the secrecy? Why midnight?" Marlon paused at the door. "Because the gym's been closed for years. City defunded it. But the keys never changed hands." And then he was gone. As Jalen zipped up his father's gloves and slung the backpack over his shoulder, he didn't notice the email notification sliding across his phone screen. A cease and desist from Apex Media, demanding he sign a waiver or face legal action. The match hadn't even started, and the war had already begun. The street was darker than usual when Jalen turned the corner toward the Old Morris Community Gym. Midnight in Atlanta had a sound. The low hum of distant traffic, the occasional bark of a dog, the metallic clink of train cars crawling across rusty tracks. But around the gym, even the city's pulse seemed to fade. The building loomed like a memory wrapped in dust, boarded-up windows frowning down at cracked sidewalks, ivy coiling over rusted gutters like nature had tried to reclaim what bureaucracy abandoned. The front door creaked on its hinges when Jalen pushed it open. It didn't resist. It sighed, as if it remembered him. Inside, the gym smelled of mold and nostalgia. The faint scent of old sweat, canvas and wood varnish lingered, stubborn like grief. Jalen stepped over a splintered floorboard and saw him, Marlon Carter, already in the ring, taping his own wrists with focused ease. A single hanging light above the ring buzzed softly, its flicker casting slow-moving shadows across the ropes like ghosts circling the past. "You're late," Marlon said without looking up. It's 12:01, Jalen replied, brushing dust off the front of his hoodie. Marlon smirked. Late's late. Jalen tossed his backpack against the wall. The old gloves inside, landing with a muffled thud. His eyes scanned the gym, like a church stripped of its pews. The speed bags were deflated. The heavy bags hung by single chains, half-stuffed and leaking sand. The mirrors were either cracked or stained, and the floor mats had more duct tape than foam. But still, this was where it began. Not just for his father, but for dozens of kids who had walked through those doors with nothing but a name and a hunger to prove it mattered. Marlon hopped down from the ring and gestured toward the corner. Start with footwork, no music, no timer, just you and the rhythm. Jalen obeyed. He centered himself on a square patch of floor where the rubber tiles hadn't peeled away. He started moving, small, deliberate steps, shifting weight from heel to toe, right to left. Marlon watched, arms crossed, face unreadable.
"You're light," Marlon muttered. "But you're not deliberate. You move like you're apologizing for the space you take."
Jalen's eyes snapped to him. What's that supposed to mean? It means you've been shrinking to survive, Marlon said. In this city, in those classrooms, in that damn gym with Dalton, you dodge everything except your own worth. You gotta stop ducking yourself. Jalen blinked hard, jaw clenching. Again, Marlon barked. He moved. Faster this time. More focused. Sweat started to bead on his temple. His sneakers scraped rhythmically against the floor. The gym seemed to lean in, like it remembered this cadence. Marlon walked over to a broken milk crate, pulled out 2 old resistance bands, and looped them around Jalen's wrists. Keep your hands up. The bands will snap if you drop your guard. Jalen adjusted, feeling the tension immediately. You ever heard of structured chaos? Marlon asked. Jalen shook his head. It's when everything's falling apart, but inside you've got a blueprint. He moved to the far side of the room, grabbed a broken jump rope, and tossed it over a cracked pipe to create a makeshift pulley. Then he attached a pair of dumbbells with rope and gestured for Jalen to pull. This ain't pretty. It ain't clean. But it works, just like you. The next hour blurred into grit and grime. Squats with a weighted backpack, push-ups with old books stacked on his shoulders, slipping drills against duct-taped strings stretched between pillars. Every movement was like digging into his marrow, pulling rage and pain from places even Jalen didn't know existed. Marlon didn't talk much. He didn't praise or criticize. He watched. He waited. And occasionally, he'd mutter something that hit like a hook. You think they see your talent? They see a headline. You think they fear your hands? They fear your confidence. You're not fighting Chase. You're fighting the story they wrote for you. The words soaked into Jalen like sweat through his clothes. He moved faster, hit harder. His chest burned. His legs trembled. But he didn't stop. And then it came. A moment. Midway through a mirrorless shadowbox round, Jalen froze, something sharp slicing through the fog of motion. A sound. Laughter. But not in the gym. From his memory, a white coach from middle school, watching Jalen spar with an upperclassman, had once chuckled and said, "Fast feet for a skinny kid. Bet you run real well when the cops show up." The gym flickered back into view. Marlon was in front of him now, arms folded. You all right? Jalen nodded, then shook his head. I hate how they look at me, he whispered. Then change what they see. Jalen's hands balled into fists.
I'm tired of being the joke.
Marlon nodded. Then be the punchline they regret. Another hour passed. By the time Jalen collapsed onto the floor near the ring, his shirt clung to him like a second skin, soaked in sweat and the salt of uncried tears. His hands trembled, the gloves now resting beside him, soaked and worn but solid. Marlon sat across from him on a stack of folded mats. You've got pieces, he said, but you're still broken. I'm not broken, Jalen muttered. Marlon leaned forward, his voice lower now. Jalen, I trained your father. I know what broken looks like when it walks in pretending it's whole. You've got fire, but fire without control, that'll burn you before it lights anything else. Jalen looked up, eyes shining but not weak. So what now? Marlon stood, picked up the gloves, and tossed them back into Jalen's lap. Now you show me if you can build something from what they tried to bury. Jalen nodded, chest rising, the weight of everything, expectation, history, humiliation, settling like armor. But just as he stood, just as resolve began to replace exhaustion, Marlon's voice turned steely. You're not ready yet, he said flatly. Jalen froze. What? You heard me. But Marlon shook his head. That ring isn't just four corners and some ropes. It's a stage. And right now, you're walking in with heart, but no shield. You go in there like this, and they won't just beat you. They'll bury your father's name while they're at it. Silence hung between them. Then Marlon turned toward the darkness of the locker room, grabbing a battered towel from a nail in the wall. Meet me again tomorrow. Same time. He paused. And come hungry. As Jalen gathered his things and stepped into the night, the flickering street lamp outside buzzed once, then snapped off, plunging the block into darkness. He didn't see the sleek black car parked across the street, or the figure inside, watching his every move. Someone else had begun their own preparation for something far bigger than a boxing match. The morning crawled in, under gray skies. The sun hidden behind clouds, thick with humidity, and the tension of what was to come. Jalen sat at the kitchen table, elbows planted, his chin resting against fingers laced so tightly they trembled. The apartment was quiet, save for the distant whir of traffic and the intermittent clink of a spoon in Riley's teacup. The air smelled faintly of toast and nervous energy. Jalen's laptop was open. The screen paused mid-frame on one of Chase Dalton's matches. His ninth title defense, a freeze frame of Chase's grin, before the knockout. Perfectly lit, perfectly timed, perfectly packaged. Jalen had spent the past 3 hours watching Chase's fights back to back. Every combo, every fake smile before a showy hook, every subtle elbow during a clinch that referees missed. There was precision there, sure, but not just of an athlete, of a performer. Chase didn't fight to win, he fought to be watched. And Jalen knew now that this wasn't just a boxing match. It was a broadcast, a cultural message disguised as sport. This is who we let win. His eyes don't lie, Jalen muttered, rewinding one clip. Riley walked over and placed a plate in front of him. Eggs, toast, untouched. Her own face was tight with concern, though she masked it with quiet routine. You've been watching these all morning, she said. What are you looking for? A crack, he replied. Something real behind all the camera angles. Riley sat down beside him, then pulled something from her back pocket. A folded envelope, creased from years of safekeeping, marked in their father's heavy, unmistakable handwriting. I wasn't going to give this to you yet, she said. But today feels right. Jalen stared at it. What is it? Your 17th birthday letter, she said. He wrote one for every year before he passed. I found this one when I was cleaning out the closet last summer. Jalen's throat went dry. His hands moved slowly, carefully, as if the paper might crumble under the weight of memory. He unfolded it. The ink had faded slightly, but the words were still legible, clear, strong, and filled with the cadence that only Donovan Brooks could summon. Son, if you're reading this, I'm not there. And that breaks me. But if you're reading this, it means you've made it to 17. That's not something every black boy in this country can say. So first, you survived. Second, never mistake survival for submission. You got my blood, which means you were born with more than fists. You got will, fire, sense. The system will tell you who you are, before you even decide. Your job is to write louder than they talk. Speak through your actions. Punch only if it teaches. Walk only if it scares them. The gloves you carry, they ain't just leather. They're memory. Mine. Yours. Our ancestors. They held plows before they held fists. They wrote poems before they wrote checks. They bled before they ever got a chance to win. You owe them your fight, not for a trophy, for dignity. Only limits you got are the ones you accept. Happy birthday. Now go make him watch. The letter trembled in Jalen's hands. He couldn't speak. The words weren't just a message. They were a prophecy, a challenge, a lifeline. And every syllable pulled something loose in him that had been coiled in silence for years. He had been walking through life like a ghost, wearing skin. But now he was flesh, purpose, flame. I'm scared, he said, the confession breaking the silence like glass. I know, Riley replied, but you're ready. Just then the front door buzzed. Jalen looked up, startled. Riley frowned and went to answer. A moment later, Reggie Devin Hayes' uncle, and a former friend of Donovan's, stepped inside. Older now, but still tall and commanding. He wore a mechanic's jacket and carried the weariness of someone who'd seen how dreams get chiseled down by racism, poverty, and backroom deals. He nodded at Jalen, then sat at the edge of the couch. I won't stay long, he said, voice low. I just came to say what no one else will. Jalen looked him in the eye. Go ahead. They ain't expecting you to win, Reggie said. They expect you to survive. And honestly, that's already enough. But if you walk in there trying to impress them, trying to show you belong in their story, you'll forget your own. Jalen absorbed every word. Survival first, Reggie continued. Then victory. And remember, Chase ain't your enemy. He's just the one holding the mic. The real enemy's the script. Riley nodded slowly, tears gathering but not falling. Reggie stood. And no matter what happens in that ring, he said, voice softening, don't let him walk away thinking you were grateful just to be there. As he left, the apartment filled with a different kind of silence. Not fear, not defeat, readiness. Jalen stood, letter still in his hand. He walked to the small dresser in his room, pulled out his father's gloves, and slipped them on. They were tight around the wrists, stiff around the palms, but once they were on, they felt like truth. He grabbed his hoodie. Where are you going? Riley asked, standing. He looked back, eyes clearer than they'd ever been. Toward the arena, he said. There's no turning back. As Jalen walked into the hallway, a voice behind him stopped him in his tracks. It was Riley, holding his phone, face pale. Jalen, they just changed the fight rules. Chase's team made it official. No headgear, no round limits, no referee override. This isn't an exhibition anymore. It's a spectacle. The arena pulsed with light and bass. Floodlights danced like restless spirits above the ring, throwing long shadows that swept across the audience, amplifying every movement, every breath. The air was humid with sweat and anticipation, thick with the perfume of overpriced beer, and the hunger of spectators who didn't come to watch a match. They came to witness a demolition, and Chase Dalton was ready to deliver. A voice boomed through the speakers, too loud to be ignored. And now, you're undefeated, undisputed, Apex welterweight champion, Chase Dalton. The crowd exploded. He emerged from a cloud of dry ice, flanked by a cameraman, 2 trainers, and a woman holding a sign with his signature catchphrase, "Stay unbeaten." Chase wore gold trunks that shimmered like wealth. His robe trimmed in white fur. His mouthguard glinted as he smiled. His hands raised like a Roman emperor stepping into a gladiator's coliseum. Even his walk was calculated, each step a beat to the song blasting over the speakers, some remixed track that sampled civil rights chants over trap drums, repurposed into hype. It was performative. It was hollow. It was powerful. The crowd didn't care. They cheered, filmed and roared, because he wasn't just their champion. He was their narrative, their clean-cut all-American fighter. White, controlled, invincible. And tonight they expected him to teach a lesson. Street kids stay in their lane. Someone muttered from the VIP row. He's gonna make that boy disappear. Another whispered. Then the lights shifted. The music stopped. No intro voice this time. No fog machine. Just silence, as the side door of the arena creaked open. Jalen Brooks stepped through. He wore his father's hoodie, gray and frayed. No sponsors, no entourage, no camera crew. Just him, his gloves, and every burden that came stitched inside them. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't wave. He didn't posture. He moved with the stillness of someone carrying names. On his left glove, he'd scribbled 3 initials in black marker, DLB, Donovan Lee Brooks. On his right, a faded patch from the Morris Community Gym. The audience murmured. Some laughed. Someone shouted, "Where's your coach?" Another, "You Uber here, champ." But others grew quiet, because silence has weight when someone walks in with that kind of stillness. When someone refuses to play their role in a drama they didn't ask to be cast in. Jalen stepped into the ring. No warm-up jog. No shadowboxing. Just a glance at Marlon Carter in the shadows, seated near the corner, arms crossed, nodding once. Across the ring, Chase grinned. He bounced in place, tugged on his gloves, whispered to his trainer with a smirk. He's shaking. The bell rang. Round 1. Chase stepped in confidently, fast on his feet, launching a sharp jab, a warning shot. The kind thrown not to hurt, but to remind. Jalen didn't flinch. He slipped left, head low, and pivoted around Chase's lead foot, positioning himself at an angle most of the crowd missed. Chase's eyes narrowed. He fired again, this time a double jab into a right cross. Flashy, clean. Jalen ducked low, letting the punch pass above his shoulder like wind. His glove brushed Chase's ribs as he stepped through. Not a hit, not yet. Just a reminder that he could. The crowd chuckled, but the tone was shifting. Jalen didn't throw a punch in the first minute. He just moved, dodged, evaded. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even flashy. But it was sharp. It was disciplined. It was a ghost haunting a champion. Chase's grin began to crack. He swung again. A hook this time, wide and careless. Jalen leaned back, just enough to let the glove kiss air. Then he stepped forward, chest to chest, eyes level. No words, just presence. And that, more than any punch, rattled Chase. The audience noise shifted from laughter to murmurs. He's not even trying to hit. Did he just bait that punch? He's making Chase look slow. In the fourth minute, Chase grew reckless. He launched a flurry body shots mixed with looping overhands. Still no contact. Jalen moved like water, never in one place long enough to catch, but always there like memory. Then finally, Jalen struck. One shot. A straight jab. Nothing powerful. But it landed. Right on Chase's chest. Not a knockout. Not a headline. Just punctuation.
I'm here.
The bell rang. The crowd didn't erupt. They inhaled. Because for the first time they weren't watching a kid get flattened. They were watching a narrative begin to fall apart. In the corner between rounds, Chase's trainer leaned close and hissed, "You better finish this. That kid's writing his own story out there. And they're starting to read it." The air between rounds was thick with performance sweat, camera heat, and the acrid scent of something intangible, ego unraveling. Chase Dalton paced inside his corner like a caged animal whose script wasn't going according to plan. His coach leaned in close, teeth clenched behind his headset, whispering sharp warnings through his mic while pretending to smile for the audience. "You better finish this," he hissed. "That kid's writing his own story out there. And they're starting to read it." Chase didn't respond. He just nodded, jaw flexing. The crowd's laughter had gone quiet after round one. Not gone completely, just strained, uncertain. What began as spectacle was mutating into suspense. This wasn't what they paid to see. This wasn't the delivery boy crumble they expected. And Chase could feel it, like static under his skin. Across the ring, Jalen sat in his corner, eyes forward, breath slow. No one stood beside him. No water poured down his back. No cutman rubbed Vaseline into his cheekbones. Just Marlon, seated 10 feet away in the shadows, offering no words, only a steady gaze. Jalen's mind wasn't on strategy. It wasn't even on winning. It was on silence. The kind of silence you learn to live in when you're a black boy in America, where your anger scares them, your joy confuses them, and your talent threatens the order they built. The bell rang for round two. Chase approached slower now. The swagger had dimmed, replaced by calculation. He didn't smile, didn't talk. His shoulders rolled with intention. He threw a jab, controlled. Snapped back quick. Jalen stepped around it, shifting weight to his back foot. His movement wasn't rehearsed. It was musical, like rhythm passed down, not taught. He wasn't dancing. He was feeling. Chase fired another combo. This time a jab into a sharp right hook. Jalen ducked, pivoted, and rose to the side. Chase turned too late. The crowd murmured again. It was happening. Not in a dramatic knockout. Not in a viral punch. In movement. Chase was boxing. Jalen was flowing. There was a difference. And the audience was beginning to see it. Why he moved like that? Someone whispered near ringside. "Yo, that's that old school stuff. Real footwork." Dalton looks like he's chasing shadows. And Chase heard every word. He launched a hard body shot. Landed it. But not clean. Jalen rolled with it, absorbing just enough to keep moving. Then a left uppercut. Missed. Jalen slipped low. And for a split second, their heads passed close. He whispered, "You tired yet?" Chase's nostrils flared. He backed up, then launched a flurry. Sharp, tight, text. Jalen took a glancing blow to the ribs, but kept his center. He moved, countered, feinted, and for the first time, pressed forward. Not hard, not reckless, just enough to take space. The crowd shifted again. Eyes widened. Phones dropped from recording. Because now it looked like Jalen wasn't surviving. He was boxing. He was in control. Chase's punches started to lose shape. His balance off. His shoulders rising. His breath heavier. His coach shouted, "Settle down. Set your feet." But Chase couldn't hear him. He heard the silence. The kind that comes when a crowd starts rooting for the wrong guy. Then it happened. 30 seconds before the bell. Jalen slipped another punch and stepped too close, his shoulder brushing Chase's. And Chase snapped. He lunged. Not with his glove. With his elbow. A sharp, dirty elbow aimed at Jalen's jaw. It grazed him. Not enough to drop him, but enough to blur the edges of his vision. The referee stepped forward. No warnings. Chase muttered. He's fine. Jalen didn't fall. He stepped back, steadied, blinked through the flash of light in his eyes, and raised his gloves again. The ref let it go. Of course he did. Because Chase wasn't just a fighter. He was a commodity.
And Jalen?
He was a guest. A tolerated intrusion. But the crowd noticed. They saw the elbow. They saw Jalen stand back up. They saw the look in Chase's eyes. And for the first time, they doubted the Golden Boy. As the bell rang, Jalen walked to his corner slowly, not limping, not broken, just quiet. And Chase, he stayed in the center of the ring for an extra second, chest rising fast, staring across the mat, like he'd seen something he didn't believe was real. His coach grabbed his wrist hard and leaned in, his voice sharp and low. He's making you look sloppy. One more round like that, and they're gonna start cheering for him. You want that? The air inside the arena changed before the bell even rang. It wasn't temperature, it wasn't volume. It was pressure. An unspoken realization had spread through the crowd like a silent tide. Something was happening that wasn't in the script. Somewhere between round 2 and round 3, the delivery boys stopped being content, and the city, black-brown, indifferent, watching had started to shift in its seat. In the far corner, Jalen Brooks sat stone still. Sweat clung to his face like a second skin. His ribs ached. His mouth was dry. But in his mind everything was clear. He wasn't in the ring. He was on his father's porch, watching Donovan wrap his fists in old tape, murmuring truths about men and mirrors, and the kinds of fights that never get scored. Marlon didn't speak. He didn't need to. Across the ring, Chase Dalton seethed. His nostrils flared. His gloves beat together, not out of readiness but out of ego, unraveling. The whispers in the crowd had turned into murmurs, and murmurs into reluctant cheers. Not for his flash, not for his style, but for the boy who was never supposed to make it past the intro music. He's making you look sloppy, his coach had said, and Chase felt it. He wasn't chasing Jalen anymore. He was chasing the control he'd lost. The bell rang. Final round. Chase charged, not with poise, but heat. His punches were fast but erratic, filled with the desperation of a man who realized he'd stopped being the protagonist. Jalen didn't meet him. He moved. He let Chase chase. And every time Jalen was just an inch away, slipping left, stepping offline, ducking low. He wasn't dodging anymore. He was setting. The crowd noticed. He's baiting him. He's waiting. Then Chase made the mistake. A wild right hook too wide, too high. Rage, not rhythm. And Jalen was already beneath it. It wasn't instinct. It was history. His knees bent. His back coiled. And like a spring finally released from silence, Jalen launched an uppercut that traveled with more than muscle. It carried every insult, every stare, every dismissed opportunity, every "you're not supposed to be here." His glove connected with Chase's jaw. The sound was sharp, not thudding, a snap of fabric and bone and breath. Chase's body twisted, his feet lifted, and he stumbled backward, arms loose, head tilted skyward, like he was searching for the narrative he used to own. The crowd erupted, not in shock, in relief. Gasps, shouts, cell phones dropped, screams ricocheted off steel beams. Because it wasn't just a punch. It was a rupture, a hole in the story. The undefeated was falling. Chase landed hard, his gloves sprawling out like broken wings, legs bent awkwardly. The referee blinked, stunned, then dropped to one knee beside him. Jalen stood in the center of the ring, breathing heavy, eyes wide, not in disbelief, but in recognition. He'd seen this before. Not here. In his father's VHS tapes. This moment. This exact silence. Where everything stops. Not because it's over, but because something else is beginning. 2. Chase's coach screamed something unintelligible. 3. A woman in the front row covered her mouth, tears welling. 4. Riley stood from her seat in the nosebleeds, both hands on the railing, whispering, "Come on, J." 5. Chase blinked, rolled to his side. 6. He reached for the bottom rope. 7. He pulled with shaking arms. 8. His knee found the canvas. 9. He tried to stand, but his legs, they weren't ready. The ref raised his hand. The crowd surged again. But behind him, unnoticed, Chase's trainer was on the phone. His face pale. "Do it now," he whispered. "Release the footage. He needs to lose outside the ring too." The glow of victory still clung to Jalen Brooks, but the world had already begun to darken around him. Just hours after his thunderbolt uppercut made history, a new storm broke, this time off the canvas. The viral video appeared first as a whisper, then a roar, grainy footage, supposedly captured backstage, showing Jalen receiving an injection from an unidentifiable figure. The video was low resolution enough to be plausible, high enough to ignite conspiracy. The caption read, "Delivery boy got help." Nobody pulls that off clean. Within minutes, social media platforms exploded. Threads popped up accusing Jalen of using performance-enhancing drugs. Race-coded comments slid beneath praise like venom. Typical. Must be on something. System let a black kid through again. Influencers resurfaced old racist tropes dressed as tough talk. He wasn't talented. He was juiced. The delivery kid hashtag flipped overnight from pride to suspicion. Riley saw it first. Tears filled her eyes as she scrolled through the feed on her small tablet. The apartment, once filled with warm celebration, now felt colder, like windows had slammed shut. Jalen sat beside her, lean machine still trembling with adrenaline, facing an accusation he hadn't earned, voiced by people who questioned his worth before they learned his name. "They're ripping apart his character," she whispered, her voice cracking. "How do we fight this?" Jalen clenched the gloves Donovan had given him. "We don't." He exhaled slowly. "We let the truth speak." Within 24 hours, Jalen was summoned before the Amateur Boxing Commission for a hearing. He, his sister and Marlon, sat in a sterile conference room, surrounded by men and women in suits. A drug test result was presented first. Negative. No anomalies. Clean. The room shifted. But the panel didn't stop there. They played the video, watched it, replayed it, paused it, stylized it, edited audio to accentuate deception. The commentator's voice cut in mid-sentence. Legal experts whispered. Jalen's gut twisted. The feeling wasn't fear, it was betrayal. But then the unexpected twist. The injection scene was traced to Chase Dalton's own team. A junior staffer spotted in the background of the frame in Chase-branded gear. Commission uncovered it was archival footage from Chase's recovery months ago, repurposed in a political smear. Chase's branding strategist had leaked it to warp perception. It turned out to be an inside job. Marlon's jaw clenched when the panel announced, "No evidence of wrongdoing." Jalen Brooks cleared. His voice echoed in the room for a moment. Cleared and echo had echoed across the hallways of the decisions he didn't ask for. Outside, media vultures waited. Flash cameras flickered. Reporters shouted. Jalen left the building, moving through a gauntlet of questions and skepticism. His victory no longer a celebration, but a liability. In the weeks that followed, Jalen and Riley struggled to reclaim anything resembling normalcy. The fame that poured in felt lukewarm, riddled with doubt and speculation. Local journalists alternated between glowing headlines and scathing speculation pieces. Phone calls from sponsors muted the moment they asked, "What about the video?" There were offers, brand deals, endorsements, interviews. But every pitch came with a cost. Proof of clean record, polygraphs, detailed medical history. As if boxing talent wasn't enough. As if his character remained conditional. One evening, Jalen deleted his social media apps entirely. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Gone. He tapped uninstall on each, while Riley watched with worried eyes. The phone pinged one last time. A DM from a fan saying don't let them win. And then it stopped. "I can't fight here anymore," he told Riley. "Not in comments. Not in threads. Not in viral lies." Riley folded her arms, her voice strong despite the fatigue lining her features. "And where will you fight?" Jalen turned his phone off, the screen going black with finality. He looked at the gloves on the coffee table, and back at Riley. "Only in the ring," he said. That night, they stood by the window watching the city lights. The same streetlights that had seen them celebrate now felt alien. Fame had arrived in full force. And with it, vultures. But more than anything, the system had shown its teeth. It didn't need to disqualify him physically. It just needed to smother him in doubt, to cage him in perceptions. Under the dim glow of the lamps, Riley whispered. "They tried to break him where everyone watches." Jalen nodded. "They can't break what they can't see." He picked up the gloves, tightened the straps. He didn't say it out loud, but the meaning was clear. He still believed he belonged. He still remembered his father's words. Only limits you accept are yours alone. Weeks later, at the renovated gym, Marlon halted a training drill mid-punch. One of the local kids held his phone out. "Coach, look." On screen, a news alert read, USA Boxing confirms Jalen Brooks for Olympic trials. Training camp begins next week in Colorado Springs. And beneath it, room for one coach. Jalen looked at Marlon, sweat dripping from his brow. He exhaled. "That's our ticket back." The referee's hand cut through the air like a guillotine. Sharp, undeniable, final. TKO. The sound wave that followed wasn't just a cheer. It was release. An explosion of disbelief and relief. Pride and prophecy fulfilled. The arena detonated with roars that didn't just celebrate Jalen Brooks. They rewrote him. The boy who entered through the side door in silence was now at the center of every lens, every voice, every headline. Phones shot up like a field of trembling trees. Chants began to build, staggered and uncertain at first, then full, rhythmic, undeniable. "Jalen! Jalen!" Chase Dalton sat in the corner, dazed. His mouthpiece hung from his lips, spit trailing down his chin. His perfect image, his unbeaten mythos, shattered across the canvas. He didn't speak, couldn't. Not because of the pain, but because he was no longer the subject of the story. He was scenery now, background to someone else's moment. In the ring's opposite corner, Jalen didn't raise his fists. He didn't jump or roar or dance. He stood still, breathing hard, hands at his sides, his chest rising, not in triumph, but in acceptance. Not because he'd won, but because the world had seen him try. Marlon Carter approached from the shadows of the crowd, now pushing toward the ring, his face tight with pride, but his eyes scanning for trouble. "You held your name," he said. "You held your father's gloves and gave him something they can't edit." Reggie had slipped past security somehow, now standing just outside the ring with his hand gripping the rope. "You did it, son," he said softly, his voice thick. "Not because you hit him, but because you never swung low." Jalen stepped forward, leaned into the ropes, and looked Reggie in the eye. "I didn't do it to prove them wrong," he whispered. "I did it to remember we were always right." Reggie's lips trembled, his eyes shining. Riley pushed her way through a crowd of reporters, her voice rising above the noise. "He needs space. Let him breathe." But the cameras were already closing in. Microphones rose like spears. "Jalen, what's next? Are you turning pro?" Was this about race or redemption? "Did you plan that uppercut?" Jalen didn't flinch. He just turned toward the camera that stood closest. The one with a red light glowing at the top. The one streaming to a national audience. And said, "My name is Jalen Brooks. I'm from Atlanta. I work a delivery job. And I never asked for a spotlight. But since it found me, let this be clear. This fight wasn't a miracle. It was overdue." The crowd roared again. A deeper roar. Not just fandom. Recognition. Someone from the Olympic selection committee called across the media pit. "Brooks! Jalen, we want a conversation." He barely heard them. Because from the top of the arena, on a narrow catwalk above the lights, a projection flickered to life. A video. Grainy. Edited. Malicious. Jalen's face. Altered. A montage of him stepping into the ring. Paused. Then voiceovers. A white sports commentator's old clip. Recut. "Kids from certain places. They don't belong on this stage. It's not about race. It's about readiness." Another clip. Altered audio. "He's a thug with gloves. A viral product. Not a boxer." Gasps spread. Jalen looked up, frozen. Someone had tried to take the moment. Even now. Even here. But then something changed. The crowd didn't boo him. They booed the footage. They shouted, cursed, turned their backs on the screen. Riley's voice cut through it all. "They're scared of you now." Jalen's head dropped slightly. He closed his eyes. He wasn't just fighting Chase. He had been fighting a machine. And for the first time it blinked. Backstage, as he toweled the sweat from his face, Jalen's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. A text popped up. "USA boxing team wants you in LA next week. Full scholarship. Room for one coach. You in?" The morning light filtered through the newly installed windows at Legacy Boxing Center, casting long, hopeful beams across the ring. The community had come together, painting walls, repairing broken mats, and donating worn but serviceable equipment. Kids in old Brooks-branded shirts ran shadow drills, their laughter echoing like promise. Jalen Brooks walked through the gym quietly, observing the work, not as a star but as part of a family that now had a place to stand. Then his phone buzzed with a sharp tone. He paused, heart fluttering in anticipation. The notification was from a branded account with verified checkmark and flashing blue background. Luca Reyes boxing. Jalen hesitated before opening the message, and when he did, his chest tightened. It wasn't a DM. It was a public tweet, pinned to the top of Luca Reyes's newly verified feed.
Hey package boy, how's it feel having gold gloves made of social media dopamine? Wait till you fight someone who's moving past deliverables.
Packages belong in mailbox. Below it, a slow-motion clip from Jalen's knockout round. Overlaid with Luca's face superimposed grinning and holding a delivery box. In the caption, "Deliver this kid a real challenge." The line between insult and opportunity blurred instantly. Marlon Carter shuffled over and read the tweet. His face went cold. "He's baiting you," Marlon said softly, moving the narrative back to content, not competition. Jalen crumpled the phone in his fist. "He's downplaying the fight like I was just a joke from the start," Riley said, reading over their shoulders. "Even after everything." Back then they had been invisible. Now they were visible, and subject to a world still scripted to ignore their humanity until it served spectacle. Luca Reyes, a lean, Puerto Rican junior state champion with mainstream endorsements, was new to national attention, but his brand was built on precision, photogenic knockouts, and social media savviness. If there was a narrative to chase, he'd chased it first. The Olympic trials loomed just weeks away. Announcers speculated about matchups. Analysts compared styles. Every article seemed to ask, will Reyes's pro-polish outclass Brooks's raw fire? Jalen watched Luca's highlights. Tight counterpunches, tactical ring positioning, controlled aggression. Marlon noticed how Luca's team edited videos to include drone shots, slow-motion reels, social media overlays. It was choreography, curated, and now being pitted against Brooks added drama. Marlon said, "You train for truth. He trains for views. You don't blink when you fight. He posts when he wins." Jalen nodded. He liked the idea of truth. Had learned from his father. Actions speak louder than trending tags. The tension between them made him more focused. Not fearful, it sharpened his routine. Rope skipping at dawn, resistance drills, mental visualization. Every day he'd walk through the reconstructed gym, smelling fresh paint and leather, solidifying what this place meant, not just to him but to the neighborhood that believed he could redefine what delivery kids, forgotten boys, could become. The community pitched in, quietly aware that Jalen's path was proof. Store owners donated gloves. Local artists painted murals of delivery boxes, transforming into boxing gloves. Children wrote names inside the ring, like they were writing their own futures. Everywhere he turned, little reminders that he wasn't alone. One evening, as they wound down from training, Riley set down 2 granola bars and a bottle of water in front of Jalen. She sat across from him, eyes steady. "He's trying to frame you as an influencer who lucked into a fight," she said. "Not a boxer. He wants this to be spectacle, not sport." Jalen took a bite, then looked up, voice soft but sure. "We fight for everyone watching." Riley nodded, tears shining in her eyes. For what they deserved to see. At that moment, Marlon entered carrying the gloves that once belonged to Donovan, and placed them back in Jalen's hands. "She left the gym," Marlon murmured. "Your father," she said, "fight for more than you. Fight for them." A quiet urgency settled in the room. The emotional weight of the rivalry had grown beyond gaudy tweets. This wasn't just 2 fighters. It was the delivery kid versus the brand kid. Legacy versus performance. Substance versus veneer. The next morning, media trucks lined the renovated gym's curb. Reporters interviewed local supporters and kids who referenced Jalen's knockout. Someone broke the story. "Luca Reyes says he respects Brooks, but warns he'll box him clean in trials." The air vibrated with anticipation. Everyone was already picking sides. Inside the gym, Jalen and Marlon reviewed film footage. Chase's fight, Luca's. For every highlight reel Reyes posted, Marlon found a teaching moment. A hesitation, a pause, a foot pivot that could be undermined. They worked combinations tailored to exploit weaknesses. But more than that, they spoke of legacy, history, purpose. Late that night, Jalen stood alone in the gym, quiet, running his hand across the canvas. The spot where his knockout happened felt different now. Hallowed. He whispered, I fight for everyone watching. Then pressed his forehead against the ropes, closed his eyes, breathing deep. He didn't know the outcome, but he knew why he showed up. A sharp knock on the gym's side door startled him. Marlon appeared just inside with a solemn look. He held a laminated slip of paper. In bold letters, Luca Reyes accepted Olympic invitation, but asks that the first-round match be public. Marlon's voice was low. They want to air it live. Chase was an undercard. Now you two are the headline. The arena lights dimmed, then brightened in jubilation. As the announcer's call passed over the loudspeaker, the crowd in the packed stadium released itself in a wave of shouts and tears and unstoppable applause. Jalen Brooks, the delivery boy nobody expected, stood amidst the chaos with gloves still on, breathing hard and unsteady, but still standing. The silence that preceded the uproar felt like permission, a quiet moment before everything changed. But now everything had changed. Jalen's head turned, searching the ring. Across from him, Luca Reyes, calm now, exhausted, but unbowed, extended his glove. No protest, no bitterness, just acknowledgement. In that moment, before Jalen even accepted the handshake, something shifted. Mutual respect had been earned, not granted. You earned it, Luca whispered. No camera needed to capture it, no edits required. It was real. Behind that, the roar only intensified. The chant of streets, neighborhoods, and scanners repeated the new narrative. Success through persistence, syllables punching through every prejudice. Marlon Carter and Reggie Ward, standing beside him, watched with fierce pride, both giant stones in the foundation Jalen had built. Reggie, hitching breath, leaned in. You don't know how proud I am, he said, voice thick. And just like that, the old coach's presence felt complete. He'd done all he'd meant to do. About an hour later, backstage after the official formalities, Reggie approached Jalen again. His shoulders sagged beneath the weight of unspoken realization. He cleared his throat. Your reach now goes beyond me, he said softly. It's time. I'm stepping back. It wasn't defeat, it was peace. Legacy finished its arc. Riley was already gathering her things in another corner. She looked radiant, wearing her nursing school uniform. The pin gleamed on her chest. I graduate next week, she said quietly. Now I can help heal more than just home. Their mirror experiences, Jalen rising through pain, Riley rising through care, were two sides of the same fight. Legacy Boxing Center, the renovated gym in their community, now stood fuller than ever. Donated equipment, lively kids, afternoon classes. The same walls that heard Jalen's early failures now bellowed with young dreams. And he was here, teaching, training, guiding. It wasn't showbiz, it wasn't marketing. It was something older. He moved among them, correcting footwork, adjusting stances, teaching life lessons disguised as drills. When a 10-year-old landed a clean jab in mock sparring, Jalen smiled. He said, "That's where all greatness starts." A phrase simple but powerful, looping back to the first time he shadowboxed in those alleys. Now he spoke it through someone else's voice. Soon enough, media crews returned, not for controversy or scandal this time, but for feature stories. Communities assembling around a delivery kid turned Olympic hope. They filmed kids practicing in that ring, captured Jalen smiling as he helped them wrap their hands. He didn't offer interview. He offered presence. In the background, kind of quietly but unmistakably, came another notification. Diego Alvarez, his next rival at the trials, sent a message. Congrats, we meet soon. The rivalry continued, this time not mocking or streamable, just respectful competition, built on craft and mutual forging. Jalen looked over the gym's mural, his silhouette painted larger than life. Beneath it, a delivery box morphing into a boxing glove. A community's effort in color and hope. He turned back to the kids, raising his voice. Let's do one more round. The group fell silent, then resumed drills, laughing, sweating, learning. Later, as the sun fell outside, Jalen sat on the ring steps, gloves off, letting the silence of the gym settle around him. He thought of his father's tape recorder voice. Ward men don't back down. Reggie stood at the doorway. You ready? He asked. Jalen looked ahead. Not at fame, not at next fight, but at the gym full of people waiting. Yeah, he said. Reggie smiled, shoulders softening. Let's go home. And Jalen whispered to himself, soft but sure. That's where all greatness starts. If this story moved you, don't just watch. Remember, Share it with someone who's ever been underestimated. Speak their names. Support spaces where the forgotten find their fight. Because sometimes, changing the world starts with changing the story we choose to believe. The arena was electric. Every seat filled. Lights sharper than midday sun. And a hush that felt like the city itself had held its breath. Riley stood ringside, eyes bright with hope, flanked by community members wearing Brooks and Legacy Boxing Center shirts. Their presence wasn't decoration. It was testament. This fight had become bigger than a bout. It was symbolic of every kid told they had no business in the spotlight. The announcer's voice boomed. Tonight, the middleweight final, Luca Reyes versus Jalen Brooks. A roar erupted. Luca marched in first, precise, polished, an Instagram highlight ready for broadcast. Jalen entered behind him. No sparkle, no entourage, but a quiet resolve radiated from him that outshone any floodlight. Round 1 began, and Luca charged forward with clinical aggression. Tight jabs, sharp hooks trying to assert dominance early. Jalen remained calm, absorbing the fire and measuring distance. His eyes followed Luca's rhythm, reading patterns, noting tell. Every punch he dodged wasn't just defense, it was data. The crowd cheered Luca's pace, but a slow shift began. They noticed Jalen wasn't rattled. He was studying. Round 2 and 3 passed in a blur of exchanges. Luca's precision landed flush shots. Jalen absorbed and retreated, refusing to give more than was necessary. Across ringside, Marlon leaned close to Reggie, whispering, "He's staying alive, not just surviving." And Riley watched the kids training just days ago, shadows seeing themselves in every pivot Jalen made. By round 4, Luca's early flurry had drained into sloppiness. Jalen's counters became sharper, a jab into the body, a sharp hook after slipping a punch. Luca staggered once, twice. The crowd gasped. Luca's confidence flickered. He reset his jaw and came back with harder shots. A clean right clipped Jalen's cheek. Blood bloomed. Jalen flinched, shook it off, and then responded with a chest-level left that snapped Luca's head back. Round 4 ended, with the crowd chanting, "Brooks! Brooks!" The narrative continuing to shift. Luca retreated to his corner sweating, the look of a fighter surprised at the fight. Jalen sat across, breathing evenly, the corner tense but composed. Marlon squeezed his shoulder. Round 5. The final round. Both fighters stood at the epicenter of what had become more than a match. Luca attacked first, showing impatience. He needed to reclaim narrative control. Jalen sidestepped, planted his foot, and occasionally hit back with quiet precision. Bruises blossomed under Luca's eye. Jalen's cheek swelled. With 60 seconds left, Luca unleashed a furious combination. Liver shots, body hooks, a powerful overhand right. Jalen absorbed most, ducked some, and stumbled, but came back with a low jab, followed by a right across Luca's ribs, and a subtle uppercut that rocked Luca's jaw. The arena rose as if trying to lift the fighters. With just 5 seconds on the clock, Luca lunged again. Jalen parried, closed distance, and landed a solid left hook. The bell rang mid-exchange. Both men still punching, still fighting, still bleeding. Paramedics hovered. Trainers shouted. The crowd exploded into applause. Both fighters staggered to their corners, breathing hard, bruised, damaged, but present. Jalen's sister rushed to the edge, tears streaming, as Reggie met her eyes with pride. Juxtaposed between sweat and blood, both fighters stood defiantly in the ring. As judges took their tablets and scribbled notes, the world outside spilled with commentary. Social feeds overloaded with highlights and split opinions. Luca's coach pounded the ropes, shaking his head. Marlon knelt with Jalen, voice soft. "You carried more than punches tonight." The announcer's voice cut through the roar. "After 5 rounds, it's a split decision." He paused. "Your winner and the U.S. Olympic team representative, Jalen Brooks." Cheers crashed like waves. But from across the ring, Luca Reyes looked stunned, and suddenly something glinted in his eyes that wasn't respect.